Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. As we go through this is really supposed to be more of a interactive thing in which I really ask you, what do you see in the pictures? So what I did was I was very purposeful in the pictures that I took because I kind of knew that if I went to Israel and I came back, people might ask me questions about my trip. And so I wanted to be able to have things to show. And I'll say this from the outset. Obviously, I'm not an expert on Israel. I did live in Israel for a year. The year I happened to have lived in Israel was a year that Israel was under fire. Um, it's not that hard to pick a year to go to Israel um, and find yourself in war. I was there in 1991. If you remember, that was a Gulf War in which Saddam Hussein was trying to draw Israel into the conflict between Saddam Hussein in Iraq and the war he was raging in Kuwait, in which the United States had come to the aid of Kuwait. And Israel was being drawn into the conflict so that um, Saddam Hussein could gain allies from other Arab countries because essentially Kuwait and Iraq were two Arab countries, and Saddam Hussein was looking for support. And so what he tried to do was draw Israel into the conflict, which would automatically draw other Arab countries in defense of Saddam Hussein. And so we spent, and you might remember that he was supposedly using weapons of mass destruction, or as they called it in Israel, chemical warfare. And so we spent a lot
Why?
of time that year. Um,
Why?
this is why.
Why?
Well, you can mute everyone, Rabbi, your host.
Yeah, but I don't like to do that to people. So maybe I'll do it to you though, Greg, Davin. Um, in any case, we spent the year essentially in sealed rooms. I remember we wore gas masks to my brother-in-law's wedding, and we actually spent that night in a sealed room under the King's Hotel, which was quite an interesting evening. In any case, so while I don't profess to have any real inside knowledge about Israel, I do know what it was like to live in Israel during a war. Um, and so I just want to share some pictures from my trip and see where it goes from here. And of course, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm not going to be looking at the chat. So because I won't be looking at the chat, you're going to have to in some way make yourself known. Okay, so Israel in real time is what I called this. If you look carefully at this picture, you'll see what we think of when we think of Israel. This happens to be in Tel Aviv. I'm walking down the street. You see an orange tree. Now, Israel has always been known for its Jaffa oranges, right? Because it comes from originally Jaffa area. But Israel was always known as, right, the land of citrus and exporting these to the world, which is what originally Israel's main economy was based on, and that was agriculture. If you continue throughout Tel Aviv and of course in the bottom right you see me at the Kotel. These are classic Israel images. Tel Aviv over here, you can see the cranes. There's a joke that's often been made about Israel, and that is, what's its national bird? The crane, because it's always they're always building. And this is Tel Aviv, and you can see building continues to go on. Skyscrapers and thoroughfares and all of that. These are the natural things that would normally be going on in Israel, and they currently are going on in Israel. You can see this extraordinary yoga stance that I have done here. I would really like you to notice how well I have mimicked the legs. I gave this presentation to the Hebrew High last night, and many of the students thought this was me over here. And in fact, they were wrong. So the difference is everywhere you go, you see signs everywhere. And I wanted to just show you some of them. I had an original thought that I would use the signs in Israel as Hebrew lessons. But then I got to thinking, who really would I be teaching Hebrew to? And that would be our students. And these are really not necessarily appropriate images, nor the vocabulary we want our students in our schools to be learning. So I just took pictures of signs that are in Hebrew. Here on the left, you see it says Yachad Ninatzeach, which means together we will triumph. And on the side of the skyscraper, you can see, of course, the Israeli flag. Here is one of the many hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of posters that we see everywhere all over. Here it says Tinokot, Kshashim, Nashim, Gvarim, children or babies even, elderly women and men. Adayim Chatufim al Yidei Hamas, they remain hostages at the hands of Hamas. And then there's lots of signs. I'm just going to read through them. Al tikrivu otam, al takrivu otam, right? Don't sacrifice them. Here is one of the people who was taken hostage. This sign says, Machzirin et Eden Yerushalmi Habaita. What's going on there? We have somebody's talking besides me. All right. Machzirin et Eden Yerushalmi Habaita. Please return Eden Yerushalmi to her home. This one says Kochenu be'achdutenu, that our strength comes from our unity. And this one says Bochrin bechatufim, choose the hostages. And let's see. What have more up here? Lo otzrim ad shekulam chozrim, that Israel will not stop until the hostages, till all of them are brought home. This one is really one of my favorite ones because at the very end of this presentation, you'll see a slide of me picking pomelos down south in a kibbutz called Mefalsim. And I was actually picking with people who had on their shirts that said volunteers who fought in the 73 war, in the Yom Kippur War. And I thought that was an extraordinary thing because obviously they are much older than I am. They minimally had to have been 70 because essentially they were probably 18 to 20 when they were fighting in the Yom Kippur War. And this poster really struck me. It says, Hatzanchanim me October 1973, the parachutists, the paratroopers from October 1973, Michabkim et Hamishpachot v'Hachatufim me October 2023, are sending their love to the families and hostages from October 2023. Umachazikim otam mikol alev, and we support you with our entire hearts. And then this one's a very powerful one. You see these all over the place. It says tistaklu lahem be'inayim, right? Look at them in the eyes. And then it says chayavim lachzirotam habaita achshav. It is our responsibility to bring them home now. And you can see it's a powerful, as I said, you see these posters, certainly this color scheme everywhere in Israel. This one is a great quote from Golda Meir. Obviously, this was here long before the war. It says, we have a secret weapon. We have no place else to go. And then this one we've already seen once, and that's Kochenu b'achdutenu. Our strength is in our unity. That's become a big theme in Israel because, as you know, before the war, before October 7th, there was tremendous division in Israel because of the judicial reform issues that were on the table and the far right-wing government that had been assembled by Netanyahu. So there were a lot of protests that were going on before the war. Those seem to have come to a stop with the beginning of the war, though we're now beginning to see once again creeping back into Israeli society, some division. People are united in the goal of wiping out Hamas, but we're beginning to see some fissures again back in Israeli society, whether it has to do with the issue of judicial reform, not so much, whether or not it has to do with Netanyahu relinquishing control of the government. That's beginning to surface, as we saw this week with Benny Gantz's trip to the United States in seeming opposition to Netanyahu's request that he not go. So we're beginning to see creeping into society, to Israeli society, some of these fissures. This series of pictures I titled Creativity and Suffering, Hostage Square. So in Tel Aviv, there is a square, I don't know how to describe it, but a big, large square that has been dedicated to the hostages. And how do we remember them, and how do we keep this present, and how is it affecting people? So you can see here on the far left, this is a clock. It's continuously changing by the second for how long they're held in hostage. This says, Libi soek, shuvu elai, which means my heart aches or my heart yells out. Shuvu elai, return them immediately. And this is an image we see regularly in art. I don't remember. Does anybody remember off the top of their head
The
who's
Scream by Munch.
Thank you. Exactly. So you can see the utilization of that. And then we see these kinds of things. Lo lahafsik lachshov alehem. We're not going to stop thinking about them. V'lu l'rega echad chatuf. As long as there is even one hostage. And so we see lots of different kinds of representations. We see here on the far right, these empty yellow chairs. Yellow has become the symbol. It may have to do back when I don't remember who it was that was holding hostage American hostages for whatever it was. And we started tying yellow ribbons, and then everybody thinks it really comes from, I think it's a Tony Orlando and Dawn song, tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree.
Yeah.
It's
Hopefully it won't be 3 long years.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be 3 long years. Though, from my experience with Israelis, they believe this is going to go on a long time. This says, Ein nitzachon b'li hachatufim. There is no victory without the hostages being returned. And what I saw all over this hostage square were different organizations that came out to show their support. This happens to be a new organization, Tnuah Hamachanot Ha'olim Im Mishpachot HaChatufim. So this is an organization called the Machanot Ha'olim, the camps of those who made Aliyah. Are with the families of the hostages. This here, can you see what this is up here? Can anybody tell what this is up here?
The tunnel representation?
Exactly. It's a tunnel representation. You can walk through it, and people have inside signed notes to hostages and whatnot, but it's just a representation of it. And before you walk in, there's a tremendous sense of fear of walking into this tunnel. And I think it's really very evocative. This sign down here says, Totziu otam megehinom, right? Bring them out of hell. And this happens to be on the tunnel here. You can't see it here, but it's on the tunnel, and you can see people have started signing their names all over the place to show that they were there. This is a wild representation. So you can see here on the right, and you can see here on the left, it's actually one long table. If you look here on the right and you look all the way up, that's this blue part here. I couldn't get it in one, but you can see the stark contrast between what's going on here on the left and what's going on here on the right. This is you'll figure it out in just 1 second, but you'll notice that if you come on a Shabbat morning to our shul, to our synagogue, you'll see a table set up in front with empty chairs with pictures of hostages on it. Those are the people who are missing at our Shabbat table. So you can see that here, this is supposed to represent a Shabbat table with nice chairs and nice plates and a tablecloth and beautiful greeneries. Here is what they're showing is what hostages are having to eat, right? Dried pita, dirty water, and so on and so forth. So you can see that these seats here on the left are open, waiting for them to come home, and these seats here are occupied by hostages. It's a very, very powerful juxtaposition of these two. Okay. I'm going to save this far left for last, because I really want to have a significant conversation about it. But can you tell from these pictures? I couldn't get good pictures because of the sun and whatnot. Can you see what this is over here?
The chessboard.
No, not the left, the far right. We're going to talk about the chessboard in a minute, because I think that's the most significant piece there. But can you see what this is here on the far right?
It's like a facial image.
Yeah.
Okay. On the far right, I know it's not a good picture because the sun, you can see me in the background. Try and see what this is here.
An hourglass?
Yeah, it's an hourglass. What do you think that represents?
How long they've been there?
Oh, how much longer they have.
Yeah, I think it's more about time running out. I think that one of the significant issues that we're seeing play out, certainly in the media right now, is the fact that Hamas will not release a list of the hostages. And a lot of people say that's because they have no idea where they are. I tend to believe they know exactly where they are, because I believe that people who took hostages, people who, you'll note that when you see footage of the original capture of hostages, you'll notice that many of them were not Hamas trained fighters. They were just regular Palestinians. And I think that they were able to receive rewards for every hostage that they took from Hamas. They were able to receive rewards from Hamas for every hostage that they took. So I think that Hamas knows exactly where everyone is. My theory, and I believe there are others who have said it, is that many of those hostages are already dead.
I agree.
And so to have a list, right, would suggest that the list is complete. And if they're already dead, Hamas believes that they have less of a bargaining power with them. So I think that these are representative of the fact that time is running out. We know that time is running out for the hostages, even though we know that Hamas has held hostages for, some have been held for 8 years, some have been held for 5 years. Remember, Gilad Shalit was held for 5 years. But in this circumstance and the circumstances under which they were taken hostage leads me to believe that many of these people never survived the hostage taking, either because they were significantly wounded or killed once they were taken hostage. This image right here, I don't know, you can't really see it very well, but you can figure it out.
Yeah.
What is this here? Can you tell?
The Holocaust survivor on the one side with the
right.
thing.
So this is Holocaust survivor on one side, and this is.
There must be music festival person, or
yeah, that's what seems to be the suggestion. That is this represents somebody who was taken hostage from the music festival, juxtaposed to somebody who was Holocaust, whether survivor or killed in the Holocaust. And it says Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, that we'll never forget those of our people, Israel. It's powerful. So, okay, so now here is what I think for me was the most powerful of this. Obviously, it says bring them home now. Obviously, it's got Israel here. What do you think this is trying to teach, this representation here of the chessboard?
Hostages are pawns.
Yeah, I read it more globally, but I think that you could just easily read it as the hostages are pawns. If you look at the board, you can see that it's basically full. There are a few empty spots, but it's basically full, which is different than a regular chessboard, right?
Chessboard, right, yeah.
Right. A regular chessboard would normally have, probably half, maybe a third of the number of pieces that are on there. So for me, I read it as everybody engaged in this conflict is a pawn in some way, whether it is Palestinians who are being abused by Hamas, whether it is Hamas hiding in schools or in hospitals, and so therefore those people are being used as pawns, whether it is Israelis who have been actually taken hostage and are now pawns in this chess match, which is the conflict in the Middle East. I think that we could really expand the conversation about who the pawns are in this. There are those who are on the far left of Israel, who are Israelis on the far left, who believe that every Israeli is a pawn to Netanyahu, right? And that Netanyahu wanted this conflict.
I almost agree.
What?
I almost agree.
Right. So I can say this, there is plausibility to it. Though I don't believe Netanyahu is actually that crazy. But, there are lots of people who are manipulating the circumstance right now. And you could expand this conversation really globally, and that is other Arab countries, and what's world pressure doing to America's action in this conflict. There's a lot that's going on here that I think is that's why I think this one makes the most significant statement, because it offers us a lot of food for thought. So this I called hope and reality. If you look here on the left, Israelis are always hopeful, always, always hopeful. It's like our secret weapon. Obviously here on the far left, hands of releasing a dove.
Yeah.
Israel is everyone is embracing everybody in Israel. Here, we have strong roots born of our incredible heart. And the reality is here, if you had a chance to really read this is really a beautiful piece that was written by a hostage that was eventually released, in which she explains what was given to them to eat each day. And essentially what they got each day was maybe some old and moldy cheese, a piece of pita, and maybe a little bit of water. And what they did were the adults would save as much of the pita as possible. First, because like in the Holocaust, they didn't know when their next meal would come along, but also in order to feed children, because the children were always walking around starving when they were being held hostage. And so these are representative of how much of the pita they would eat and then save. So this to me was one of those moments where I read this and I was just so sad from it. These two up here, you can see dates. These are the dates in which these two were released. So I always say surviving and rebuilding. I think it's very, very interesting. Israel is not in any way talking about Israelis are not in any way talking about rebuilding, because for the most part, Israelis are only focused on winning the war. But there has been extraordinary damage that's been done already. And I show you this picture because the damage is ongoing. These pomelos, if they don't get picked in the next 2 weeks, will rot on the tree. because there aren't enough workers left at this kibbutz because they've either been killed or they have been driven out. Somebody want to mute themselves there. So either of these are going to rot, and therefore this kibbutz will never get the money from selling them that they wanted to, or this kibbutz will go under entirely. So every day, hundreds of Israelis and visitors. I wish Howard Zauberman was on this because he also went to Israel and he volunteered a tremendous, and he has a lot to say on this, though he's not from the big public speakers. I had a chance to talk to him about being on this, but thankfully it's his birthday, and thankfully his family remembered and took him out to dinner. So that's why he's not on this, but you should talk to him about his experience. His was also, I'll just point out this one. Do you see where my cursor is?
Mhm.
That's my daughter. Okay, that's my daughter. This girl, Yael, and this girl, Judy, are her roommates. You might recognize this woman. She's your Rebbitzin. Yael's father and I were in college and rabbinical school together. And just coincidentally, they both made Aliyah at the exact same time, both making Aliyah to a kibbutz called Alumim, which is even a little further south than this kibbutz where we were, Mifalsim. We actually went to the kibbutz afterwards to see her host family. Some of the people are returning to their kibbutzim in the south. Some are returning for day laboring and then going back to their. I'll just point out that there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are now refugees as well. They are now living in maybe hotels or relatives or whatnot. They are completely displaced and are all struggling with what's going to happen in the short term to the kibbutzim where they lived, and what's going to happen long term on whether or not people are going to actually return to their kibbutzim. So, we happen to pick pomelos. So halfway through the day, we had picked this many crates, which is pretty significant. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to put people on mute. Unfortunately, I don't mean to, I feel terrible muting people, but okay, so let's go back to sharing this. So halfway through the day, we had collected this many crates of pomelos. Just point out, this is hard. It's hard work. It's not so easy. What was interesting to me, though, was these guys who we were picking pomelos with, who fought in the Yom Kippur War, who were clearly significantly older than I am. They do it every day. They go to a different location every day, and they pick whatever is needed, picking at the time, and they're workhorses. They make us. I felt like a complete wimp. We started picking at like 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 8:30 in the morning. I don't even know. Maybe 8 o'clock. And they said we're going to take a break at 10:30, which was really, really cool because we had a chance to hear the story of what happened at Mifalsim on October 7th. And then one guy who was there picking happened to have been at the music festival. And he, because he lived in the South, really knew the back roads and was able to save hundreds of people because he kept driving back and forth. And it was an amazing story that he told about his best friend who was killed. He and his best friend and his best friend's wife, who'd been married now only a month, both were killed. And he's out there picking fruits with everybody else while we hear artillery going overhead, while we see fighter pilots and Apache helicopters and bombs going off, and he's out there picking fruits with us. You would think that he might have had a little a post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think that one of the components to the resiliency of the Israelis has to do with the fact that they find healing in service. By doing things to help, they begin to find healing. And I think that's one of the components that really speaks to the resiliency of Israelis. This is just one of the fields of Mifalsim, which I think are really, really cool. This out here is not water. This out here are solar panels, just in case you wanted to know. And so you can see we're all sitting on the back of a tractor here because the fields are significantly far away from the actual kibbutz itself. Here, I just like this picture of cows, which is on the kibbutz. This one, we're going to save this picture for last because I want to ask you what you think about this picture. So there is a factory up north called Naot. I don't know if you've ever heard of Naot shoes. They
Yes.
sandals, shoes, and whatnot.
Yeah.
If you go to buy Naot in Israel right now, you have a very hard time getting the shoe that you want in the size that you want because the war is actually being fought on two fronts right now. In the north, where the Naot factory is, currently there are bombs coming from Lebanon,
No,
and so a lot of people are displaced who live and work in the north. So that's why we have this significant challenge in Israel right now of displaced people, which is having a huge impact on their lives, but also on the economy. So Naot is really not making money the way they used to. But I wanted to show you. So this was a fundraiser that Naot did. The yellow ribbon has come to represent the hostages. And so money from the shoes that are sold will go to hostage families and to helping hostages recover when they return. There's a lot of work that's being done right now about how to help children who were held hostage begin their recovery. And this goes to this emblem here on the next to it. You can see it's like a medal as opposed to the yellow ribbon. This medal, you can see, you might not be able to see it so well. It is a heart inside an outline of the state of Israel. This is an organization that started to help women who were victims of sexual violence. And so the money from these shoes being sold are going to those two causes. And finally, this picture, can somebody tell me what they see in this picture?
woman and a child.
It's
Mom holding a
little
kid
child
and a gun.
Yeah, being held by a mother who
Yes.
has a machine gun.
Ah,
And unfortunately, this is becoming the stark contrast of the state of Israel. And that is, it's a country that is so child-centered, with an understanding now that there has to be a better way to protect those children. And so this is a mom who's carrying her kid and walking around with a machine gun. It's quite remarkable. So let's see. So I only want to, I say hope for the future. Israel still continues to do what Israel does. People are having children and people are getting married and life is going on amidst the war. It's not the first time Israel's had to do that. And also, quite honestly, this was a shameless way to show that while I was in Israel, my daughter got engaged. So this is my daughter, Mia, and this is her fiance, Sammy. He's an incredible young man who made Aliyah straight out of high school. Joined the Israeli army. He's a paratrooper. After he finished he made Aliyah right from high school, went to yeshiva for 2 years, which is an indication of his seriousness. Usually they go for 1 year. Then he joined the army, became a paratrooper at Tzadkan, and then he finished the army, and now he's enrolled in a university in a place called Ariel, which is found in Shomron. You've heard of Sumeria, right? Sometimes we refer to the West Bank as Sumeria in Judea. So he's in a college in Sumeria, Shomron, and he's finishing up his degree in electrical engineering. Over here on the right, you can see that at the plaza of the Kotel, they're setting up for a ceremony for soldiers who are getting promoted. And so you see that even amidst the war, the internal machinations of the army continue, and people are moving up in the ranks, and these ceremonies are still taking place. So that is my entire presentation in 39 minutes. So now let me just a couple show and tell things before we get started with any questions that you might have. At Hostage Square, I was able to pick up some things because as Americans, as an American, I really feel like I want to be doing things. I want to be helping out. I want to, do more than spend a day picking pomelos. And so Sharon and I made sure to spend our fair share of money in Israel, whether it was in restaurants that are emptier than they usually are, buying things because we want to support the economy. And in Hostage Square, they give you all of these opportunities to get things. So they have these, I don't know if you remember these rubber bracelets. So
Yes.
Live Strong was one of them, right? So this one, of course, says bring them home. Before I went to Israel, I was able to purchase this. These are dog tags that have become very, very popular for Israelis to wear, and non-Israelis. You can see it says Halev Shalanu Shavui Ba'aza, that our hearts are being held captive in Gaza. And in English, it says bring them home now. When I got this before I went to Israel, as a way of, like, you'll never see it out. Most people who wear them out to show their support. I think people know how supportive I am, so I don't feel a need to wear it out. I always wear it under as a reminder for me to keep them always in my heart. Then when I got to Israel, I saw these, and these dog tags were really much more powerful, in my opinion. It has a Shema on one side, and then on the back it says Higanu Lakan Kedei Lanetzach. We got to this point in order to win. And then it says Lo Nishkach V'Lo Nislach. We won't forget and we won't forgive. It's a very strong statement that I think this dog tag is making. Finally, everybody's wearing these yellow ribbons all over the place, or they're wearing yellow ribbon bracelets, or you'll see on cars yellow ribbons on the side view mirrors. You'll see, if you ever see my car, you'll see I have mine hanging from my rear view mirror. I have a yellow ribbon. And then anybody can get these t-shirts. It was important to me to get one in Hebrew, but you can get them in Hebrew or in English. It says, Machzirim otam habaita achshav, bring them home right now. Yeah, so that's all my show and tell. And that's my experience in Israel. Obviously, Israel's my happy place, even in a wartime. As you know, I have a brother who lives in Tel Aviv, and I have a nephew who lives in Efrat with his wife and four boys. I have a niece who lives near Tel Aviv, and she has two boys, and of course my daughter lives there, so I'm very, very connected to it. And amidst the war, it was really, really nice to be with them. And of course, for me, Israel is just, for me, a food excursion, obviously, because I keep kosher. It's very hard for me to find a really good burger. There's a great burger joint that I always go to in Tel Aviv when I'm there. In fact, the guy knows me already from how many times I've been there. If you were here this past Shabbat in services, I spoke about him. But the restaurants are great and the produce is amazing. So for me, the food is always a great experience. And I love being in Israel. If I wasn't a conservative rabbi and I could make a living there, I would make Aliyah, but there's no making a living for a conservative rabbi in Israel. And since I have no other skills, that's the only thing I could do. So, but I love it, and I can't wait for me to have lots of Israeli grandchildren. And that wedding will be in October, right after Sukkot. So that's an exciting thing. So with that said, everybody should.
You were able to go in the south to any of the kibbutzim that were damaged?
So
Did you see any of them? Did you
I-
see any of the
I
kibbutzim?
didn't see any damage. One thing that Israelis are great about is cleaning up and not giving the enemy the opportunity to say, look at the damage we did. So,
No, but
right.
they left a lot of the damage there for the future anyway.
Yeah,
You were in any of those kibbutzim?
I didn't see any of those. I was on those kibbutzim. I was on Alumim, and I wasn't on Alumim. I drove right by Alumim, but we ended up in a place right next to Alumim. I didn't see any damage. I didn't see, we were on the highway where all of the shootings took place, where they were just picking people off. I didn't see any burnt out cars that were there, which were all over the place right after the war. So I didn't see anything, even on Mifal Sim where I was, and we were actually on the kibbutz and drove around. I didn't see any damage at all. And I think that's part of their approach. I remember during all the earlier wars, they always left the tanks and the burnt out cars on the sides of the road, and you would see them as you drove up to Jerusalem. Yeah. You would see all those trucks on the sides of the road. I don't think Israel has so much. Tzvi, you would know better than I do, obviously, being an Israeli. But I didn't see it. I didn't see it anymore. Any other comments, questions, statements?
I have a question. How do they explain, or don't they, why the Mossad, which is world famous, didn't know about the tunnels or didn't know the extent of the tunnels?
So it's a great question, and I can't wait to hear what the answers are about them. I don't know. I'm not involved in this, but they've already begun releasing reports about the failures that took place in order to have allowed October 7th to have occurred. There are lots of rumors and theories that are running around. I don't want to say any of them because I don't want to give credence to any of them. I don't know, because for two reasons. One, I don't know because I live here. And two, they never consult me on these things. I don't know why, but they don't consult me. And so because of that, I don't really know any better than anybody else. I can tell you this. I ravenously read about Israel and the conflict. And yet I have yet to read something that I think is credible. So we're going to see. Of course, they will do a post-mortem on what happened. There certainly were lots of signs that this was coming. And I have theories about why it happened now, which I'd be happy to share with you, but I don't have any understanding of the failures that took place in order for this to be able to
allow it to happen.
Yeah, a grand scale. Any questions? Any other questions? All right.
All right.
We finished early enough that you can go watch the State of the Union, if that's your thing. If not, you could watch something else on television. So anyways, I'm always around if you want to talk, if you have questions about this that I might offer off the record. Yeah, Bruce, you had a question or no?
Yeah, just a comment. I'm part of a lot of different groups, as I'm sure you all are. And one of the groups said something interesting. So I just wanted to pass the word that there's a need for like multi-day volunteers. So what happens is like you go to the kibbutz and you pick the fruit for a day, but they spend time just getting you up to speed. But what is really needed is people that could commit sort of 3 to 4 days. So I don't know if Rabbi, if anyone has any contacts, just pass them along and I'll try to connect with the person who sent that message along.
Yeah, first off, Melton, I hate to bring up Melton, Bruce, but Melton has a trip going to Israel.
Yeah.
If we had the interest, I would be happy to organize a trip to Israel for us, a volunteer opportunity for maybe if we went for a week, a Sunday to a Sunday kind of thing. And I'd be happy to set something up. I certainly have enough contacts in Israel that we could do that kind of thing. And maybe it would be a half volunteer, half kind of touristy kind of thing. I'd be happy to organize it if we had a critical mass of people to go. I think that a critical mass is 20 when we're talking about a trip to Israel.
Right.
So
Right, and the point was just to stay in one place for a couple of days.
yeah, so
You know, you might want to like bop around and see everything,
right.
but
So
like I said, you
we
could be
certainly
most
could.
helpful.
Yeah, yeah, Bruce. I think we could do. Certainly, you and I, Bruce, could organize it. You and I have been known to organize some things in the past.
Right.
So but I'd be happy to if people want to get.
Not now. Hey, don't public.
I didn't understand what you said, Jesse.
He told me not to publicly volunteer.
Okay. So you should mute yourself before you say that. All right. Good.
Rabbi?
Good. Yeah.
I just registered for an Authentic Israel trip for a week, but it's a combination of volunteering in a lot of different sites, farms, hospitals, army, preparing meals and stuff. Afternoon is sort of sightseeing, but wartime sightseeing. Although one of the things that it doesn't go to near the border, or it doesn't go to where the music festival was, which sort of bothered me. I would like to see that as long as it's safe. This is only in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but if you're really serious about organizing something,
yeah, I would be happy to. The issue is, I'm not interested in taking people to the site of the Nova Festival for one reason, and that is I'm not interested in going to the site of the Nova Festival. I think that the exhibition that has been put up there for me is too
People died there.
it's too difficult, I think, for me. I couldn't do it. So and I'm not sure I'm going to feel more sympathetic than I already do, or more empathetic than I already do, that being at the site of the Nova Festival will do something for me. So yeah, I mean, that's just my own personal opinion. I made a conscious decision not to go there, even given the opportunity to.
It's a question sort of bearing witness.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I agree. But it's not what I can do. It's not for me.
And I talked to Howard the other night. He volunteered on a different kibbutz for a week.
Yeah.
And then he went into Sarel.
Yeah. Howard's trip was a great trip. If we decide to do something like this, I certainly would have longer conversations with Howard about where and what and when and how. All right. All right. Anybody else? All right.
Yeah, it's Larry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. First, I want to thank you for self-inhibiting yourself, not speculating about something that nobody in the public knows about, because everybody seems to have an opinion without any data, any evidence. So thank you for that. I'm just curious about how the different, what do we call different, not sects, different levels of Jewish feeling in Israel now feel unified, if they do. I mean, did you get out and talk to different, Orthodox people and Reform people? And
yeah, I mean, as all of the polls and everything indicate, Israel is 80% united, right? So that's for Israel, that's a lot.
That's unanimous.
Right? So there is emerging now, again, that same conversation about the ultra-Orthodox not serving in the army. So that's rearing a very ugly head right now. And in fact, some of the people in that camp are beginning to recognize the necessity for them to serve, but not the majority of them. So there is that issue that is coming up right now. But for the most part, people say this is Israelis are saying across the spectrum, regardless of level of observance, are saying this is the opportunity for Israel to significantly wipe out Hamas. The concern that every Israeli has and that every Jew has had from the beginning of Judaism is, so what will come next? What will replace Hamas? And so Israel seems to be, the short answer is, seems to be incredibly united. But as I said at the beginning, I'm beginning to see fissures in that unity, though every Israeli would deny it. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody want to have a last word?
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for sharing.
Welcome.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right, Laila Tov.
Thank you.
In Israel, Halomot Paz. Halomot Paz means have sweet dreams. And then the response to that is Ochel Barvaz, eat a duck. They only say that because it rhymes with Halomot Paz.
Okay.
Erev Tov, everybody.
Bye.
Laila Tov.